I still remember one of my very first lessons as a junior soldier back at the Kalawala Corps in Honolulu was to adjust the mic when you stand up there. So that's what I did. Thank you. Appreciate it. My mom would be so proud. Um, all right. Uh, you know, is that Jonathan? Jonathan! I was looking at you up there and I was like, is that a Utrera? Like, what? Wow. That is awesome. Oh, man. I can't believe I didn't say hi to you earlier. I didn't see you. Okay. That's probably it. Unbelievable. All right. Um, so I'm Chad Sparks. I'm a internal medicine doc, and my family's been in the Army for 5 generations. They came from Sweden as ministers, as officers, 5 generations ago. And then my parents came to Hawaii, or my grandparents came to Hawaii to run the ARC down there. And then my parents met at Camp Homalani. I know a bunch of you guys are going to be in Hawaii, so it's fun. And so that's where I grew up. I grew up at the Kalawala Corps at Homalani, John. It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it. But what I'm going to talk about today is your boards and how to keep them awake. Because I've been in a lot of school. I went to medical school. Before that, I went to a graduate school to get into medical school. And then I went to business school after medical school. So I did a lot of school. One lesson I learned in graduate school, before medical school, I had classes just about this time of day, and I'd get pretty sleepy. It's not like I wasn't getting sleep. I just wasn't engaged. And it really made it hard to learn, to pay attention, all these types of things. I started drinking a lot of Mountain Dew at the time. This is at University of Hawaii. And after a while, it just didn't even help, like not even that. So the lesson here is not, at your board meetings, have coffee. That's not the lesson. But it's really how to engage them a little bit more so they actually do want to stay awake. And it's not easy. It's not an easy task. I mean, I was sitting in those classes, presumably very interested in what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But this wasn't quite medical school yet. It wasn't business school yet. It was still just trying to do the prerequisites. It wasn't like exactly what I wanted to do. So that became difficult. But I made it, luckily. And let's talk about a little bit how to keep that attention without the coffee. So I've been on a whole number of boards. So, oh yeah. Was there one before this? Oh, wait, go back to the... go back to the first. Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay, so one reason I love this picture is because it's that boardroom. No one is going to fall asleep in that boardroom. We just finished talking marketing, and some of the things they talk about in marketing are colors and how they make you feel. And I just thought, when I've been taking my neurology classes and they talk about how to fall asleep, they say your room cannot be yellow. It cannot be orange or red, just because you won't be able to fall asleep. Not that you all have to paint your interior of your cores yellow, but I love that picture. Okay. All right, so today we're going to talk about why boards disengage. Why is it so difficult to keep attention? A lot of marketing is how to get attention, and then how do we keep it? So we recruit, we get our board members, we get just the right number, we get the right skill set, we think this is going to be great, we're going to accomplish so much, but then how do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them from turning over, like Dick was able to build his boards to 40, 50 people, have 25 committees? How do we do that? It's not easy. You will have a role in this endeavor. So like we said earlier, you're going to be the CEOs. You're going to be the ones in charge. You're going to be reporting to them. They're going to be reporting to you. There'll be exchange of information. Luckily, it won't be just lectures. You won't be sitting there just learning things. Your board members won't, hopefully, just be sitting there hearing report out. So that's an advantage you'll have, but you'll definitely have a role there. And then I'll give you some tools just to create a productive atmosphere, to create an optimal agenda, to be able to build some interest and give people that buy-in so that they'll back you as much as possible. Oh, that picture, that guy was not paying attention while he was walking and ran into the pole. Have you ever seen this happen? Yeah. So, yeah, we don't want our board members doing that. All right. Um, Boards disengage for various reasons, but we can break it down into 4 sort of basic concepts. So if they don't feel like they have a purpose, it's going to be a problem. They're just going to disengage. They won't want to be there, and eventually they'll just leave. So I was in the Navy, and one of the things I learned in the Navy, so I was in the Navy for my residency because they paid for my medical school, which was great. And then I got stationed out at Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. Some of you may have seen the ads about the bad water in North Carolina. You may be worried about me at this point, but I was there after the bad water, so I'm okay. But one thing I learned out there, when you're in the military, very similar to your rotation system, we would get a new CO every 3 years, 4 years sometimes. So I got to experience many different leaders. And you can tell pretty quickly, like not even speaking to the CO, what their style is like. What's their leadership style? So you may have someone that's very analytical, that's not very personable, but it's good with numbers. Maybe they're able to make it work operationally. In the military, it'd be readiness. So everybody needs to be ready to deploy. Maybe they can do that, but people aren't necessarily having fun. They're not necessarily interacting very much. It's not the most personable sort of environment. And you can tell that right away when someone comes on. And then the next guy will come on. Maybe they're very personable. Maybe they love their people. Maybe they support their people. And you can tell that too immediately, right? The entire hospital where I was would change. And it's very obvious to me. And that's one of the things I saw with leadership. Like there are those leaders that you just want to follow. One of the big leaders in my memory was my band teacher in high school. His name was Jay Romines, and he was pretty tough. He was a tough guy. He was from Tennessee, and I like speaking to the Army audience because there's a lot of band presence in the Army. So hopefully this hits. But my dad actually is a band master still in Hawaii. Yeah, divisional bandmaster. So anyway, so Jay Romines, you can picture me as a teenager, acne, whatever, marching around on the field at band camp at the beginning, or right before school starts every year, and we would fly to the Big Island, and there'd be 200 kids out on the field, and Mr. Romines would be up on the hill, right, and he'd be in these sunglasses that you can't see his eyes, like aviators, sort of like a policeman up there. And like he'd see some kids down there and be like, "Come down, why are you laughing? What's so funny?" Like literally, he'd get in people's face, and we'd be like, "Wow, what happened? Did you see it? No." But so he'd be down there for several minutes, and then he'd go back up. Everybody get in line, walk. But then, and this is the same guy, quirky guy. Christmas time, he'd be playing his sax. The Carpenters. I was in line with him at our banquet. He starts eating lettuce like out of the salad and just like popping. Quirky guy, but on the field, in the band room, he was tough. So we had him for several years, And then he went to leave, and it was like everybody just loved him. Like it wasn't, oh man, I'm so glad that he's gone. It was, he loved the music. He was purpose driven, and we loved working with him because he cared about us and he wanted us to succeed. And that's the kind of purpose, the kind of leader that you want to be if you want people to be engaged on your board. Show them their worth, show them the role that they play, and that's what will draw them and keep them with you. So purpose. Partnerships are super important as well. Um, deploying in the military, everybody has a role. You have a partner. You get partnered up, actually. So I went on one deployment, and deployments are heavy. One thing I'll always remember is in my pre-deployment exercises, they give you a sheet of paper. It's 4 squares, and each one has a question about yourself. One is like, and there are things that no one else would know. One is like, what's your mother's maiden name? Or, what's your first pet that you ever had? What was your 8th grade teacher's name? These types of things. And then you give it to them, and you realize that these are the questions that they're going to ask you if you get caught by the enemy and they come to rescue you. Well, that's like scary. Like I was going to the Middle East, like, I'm a doctor. Why am I getting captured here in this scenario? Like, that's really scary. But you have partnerships. This is why it's so important that you work with your partners, you depend on each other, and then you can work step by step, hand in hand. And that's going to be your role with, say, the chairman of the board and the other board members. And you want them to feel that connection with you so that they're there right with you in the trenches, so to speak. And with Salvation Army, I mean, the metaphor goes on and on. But that's the partnership you want to invoke in these people. And then progress. So I have 2 kids. One's 5 and one's 8. My son, Davey, he likes to play soccer. And he wants to get better. And so we put him in, he was in AYSO, which is just like a basic community league, and then this year we put him in AYSO Select. And he didn't really have any concept of like true improvement, but they had their first game this past week, and the level of play is noticeably better. And you can tell they won the game, which was amazing. Yeah. But you can tell his excitement for the game was just so much better. Like last year in regular AYSO, he was on a great team. They won every game, actually, at least of the regular season. And he was happy about it, for sure. He was happy he scored some. He likes to play goalie, actually, which is pretty cool, but he wants to be as good as possible. He wants to score also. But you could tell that he just, seeing that progression and that he's on even a better team, maybe they'll get better this year, he'll gain skills. He wants to be a professional soccer player. He's doing a presentation on Ronaldo, who's like one of the best ever. Yeah. So, but you could tell it just made his eyes light up. Whereas if I'm playing golf and I'm stuck at shooting 90s, the likelihood that you're going to continue playing is just not as high. You just really want to see that progress. And so one of the things we'll talk about, one of the tactics is like sharing your wins with your board. Don't focus on just the problems. They want to see progress. So share that with them. And then psychological safety is super important. I think we've all been in groups, in circles, in classes with someone that's very aggressive, whether they're just talking a lot and it's hard to get a word in edgewise, or they're very opinionated. Sometimes it gets scary. It gets scary to share, especially if you're in a board full of people that are different from you. The boards that you guys are going to be putting together are going to be very diverse in many ways. So ideally, actually, you're going to build them for diversity. You'll have different skill sets, people from different backgrounds. Some will give you certain things that others can't. And you'll do that purposefully. But at the same time, that's going to make it a little bit more difficult for you to speak to them, right? Because each one wants to gain something different from their experience on the board. So you'll have to play that balance delicately. I had a guy in my team. So my day job is with Anthem Blue Cross, which I think is your insurance, actually. So let me know if you need anything. But I, so yeah, right. Here's my email address. When I first started with Anthem Blue Cross in 2018, I was running the Medicaid medical directors team for California. And it's a really interesting team. It was 10 doctors. One was a lawyer. So we would meet every week, twice a week. And invariably, the lawyer would speak a lot. My mom was a lawyer too, so it's all good. But he was very opinionated. And it's not that he had a strong opinion per se, like he didn't belittle anyone, he didn't, he wasn't insulting at all. He's a very nice guy. He just liked to speak up. And then there were some that were very quiet. So you get the whole range, of course. I think that people who volunteer for a board generally will speak up because that's what they're there for. They want to. But you'll still get some of that that range of personality. And it's going to fall on you guys to really try to bring out the most from people that it's hard to do that with. And then maybe manage some of the other folks. So really ensuring that safety for everybody is going to be important. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Okay, so now the points that I just made around those 4 very important concepts, we'll go through them a little bit more. Okay, so unclear roles in decision. So roles are very important. And you can think about a role in a couple different ways, right? So there's, when you think about purpose, there's the mission part of it, and then the role part of it. So mission is like, what are we all doing here? And roles are like, what am I doing here? So this really comes into play when designing committees and bringing everyone together and making sure everyone has a specific role. Because it's very helpful, right? If you need something to be done and someone has that role, then they're automatically going to be called to participate. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to participate. So by giving them a specific role, whether it's finance committee or outreach committee or whatever committee or role you'd like to do, it's pretty helpful to give everybody a role, actually. So I've been in boards where nobody has a role, and it becomes a little bit problematic. You can always call on people, but if they have a role, it's just a little bit more natural. And they'll feel invested in the decisions that people are making. So, and as we talked about with seeing progress, like this will help them see their own progress in the decisions. So if they're helping make decisions and the decisions go great, or maybe there's a little bit more work to do, they're invested in that decision because they helped, because it was part of their role. So they see themselves in that decision. And then, ambiguity just kills the energy. It just doesn't work for anybody. If no one has a role, then everybody's looking to the side. There's a story when we're doing a CPR class. You know, if someone passes out, right? And there's a whole crowd around. Do you guys have to take CPR? You do? Okay, nice. So they told you this. So what do you say when you want someone to call the ambulance? Yeah, you appoint someone. You call 911. Exactly. Otherwise, no one will do it, right? It's just awesome. Good job. Um, okay. I'm not sure why the title isn't showing it, but anyway. Because now I have to remind myself what the title was. You can go to the next one. I think that was. Yeah, weird. Yeah. I wonder if I can see it on here. Okay, I think this one was about bureaucratic meetings. So, as we talked about with marketing, storytelling is very important because it keeps people involved. If you just like go up there and like report out a bunch of numbers, like okay, blah 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 blah, like that's no fun. Um, so, okay, there are a few things that I like to do with agendas, especially around really bureaucratic meetings, which you guys may have, like especially like advisory boards are a little bit more fun because you can talk about various issues or whatever, but if something's just like an oversight board where you're going over policies and procedures, then it becomes a little bit dry. So there are a couple of things that I like to do, especially even with the agenda, um, just to keep people interested. So, I mean, of course, you don't want to talk at the board. You want to involve them, you know, call their names, stuff like that. But let's go to the next slide, actually. Okay, so here's an example of like a routine board agenda on the left, and then something that's more engaging on the right. So okay, call to order, everybody. Do you guys have to do like Robert's Rules of Order or anything like that? Okay, so Robert's Rules of Orders. It's a book that just says what has to happen at each part of the meeting. Like, okay, and the words actually, it's like quotes like, "Do I hear a second? Someone has the second." You know, all of that. So there's that, which I've gotten from boards that I've been on. But then, like, that's not very fun. Like, you want to make things fun for people, right? So, like, instead of saying call to order, you know, call it a mission moment. You know, welcome to today's mission moment. And you can actually welcome people in. Like, you don't have to just say, "Oh, I call to order." It's like, "Oh, welcome everybody." You know, like it's so nice to see you guys. You know, make it a little bit interpersonal. You could call people out. "Hey, how was your soccer game?" Whatever. Just make it interesting. And I do think titles are super important because if you send this out pre-meeting and they're like, "Oh, we're going to have an officer snapshot. Can't wait for that officer snapshot. I really want to learn about that person." You know? It's much better than officer report. So these types of things I think are important. Okay, so, and then further down the agenda, again, wins. I think instead of saying program report, let's talk about the wins. There are a lot of businesses actually that will start the day with wins. You'll go to work and in the morning people will be like, "Yesterday was amazing. You guys did great. We helped," like for the Army it might be like, "We helped 85 people yesterday alone." Things like that. People want to hear that. And that goes to speaking towards your progress. Like, show them that you're making progress, that you're doing good. What's the feeling that you guys are getting looking at the agenda on the right versus the one on the left? Yeah. Yeah. And you can build in themes, right? You can be like, well, if it's Christmas time, it could be Christmas themed. Or if it's somebody's birthday, if it's your chairperson's birthday, you can build that in, like happy birthday. And you can build drama also. So you might want to put the fun things towards the end. Like a lot of times, if you like the board meetings I've been to, like there'll be birthdays, like happy birthday. We're celebrating at the end of the meeting, so you have to stay. You have to stay the whole time. You don't get food until the end. Sorry, guys. Stuff like that. So anyway, okay. Oh yeah, okay. So this one speaks again to the psychological safety, but it also speaks to something I'll touch on in a little bit. I want to talk about creativity because I think creativity is so important, um, just to mix things up, make things interesting, because that's the whole way you make things engaging. That's the whole way you keep the eyes on you. That you keep people sort of entertained almost, coming back. But you do need space for ideas and critical thinking. And it's interesting because some of the boards I've been on, you'll have to go do strategic planning. And it's always kind of like, oh, we got to do strategic planning. But then you get there and you're like, okay, we have these problems. How are we going to solve it? And you just start throwing things out, brainstorming, and everybody gets to participate. What do you actually think? What do you think? You do not want the board feeling like observers, like they're just sitting there looking, staring, and watching. That's the worst. Okay, next. Okay, so these are a few ways that will help you build trust, build that relationship. We've talked a lot about relationships today. So as the officer, you'll have relationships with all these folks. And you will have to, like when I first came on and Joey was the chair at that time, Joey Zumaya, and he was really good about building relationships. He would call me, he would text me. I'm sure Calta does the same thing. But you really start to know someone a lot better. And then, of course, you're going to stick around because you're friends. So I think that's a huge way to not buy. I almost said buy their loyalty. Not buy their loyalty. How to build their loyalty. There you go. Okay, and then like I say, a problem heavy. Invariably, you're going to have those meetings that are problem heavy. And then you have to be even more intentional about sharing some wins. Like there have been times at our tab meetings where something comes up as a big issue. The commissioner will come in and be like, "It's pretty significant stuff going on today," and you talk about it for a long time. But he was always very good about breaking it up with some wins. Be like, "Okay, now I want to show you some pictures from Micronesia that I visited, and they got a bunch of mattresses or whatever." It really helps to really bring back that hope and optimism that you can solve the problems that are at hand. So, and then of course follow through too. You definitely need the follow through to show them that they're contributing to something that's worthwhile. Okay. All right. We talked a little bit about roles already. Of course, that leads to passivity, like we were talking. Too much staff control is very important too. Like I've been on boards where the CEO will just talk the whole time, and those are terrible meetings. Whereas the meetings where she actually had questions to ask or made it more interactive, those are much better meetings. They went quicker, they were more interesting, people were happier. And then I think we talked about the other two. Okay. Creativity is one of my favorite subjects. I just think it's so much fun and so useful, actually. Here are a couple examples. There are different types of creativity, right? So a lot of times when we think about creativity, we think about writing music or doing art. And those things are amazing, obviously. A lot of those things may be considered like interpretive. So like if you paint something, this is how you see that thing. in the world. Um, and then there are happy accidents. So in my world, there are some medications that were originally built for some one thing and then found to be useful for another. I think one of the biggest examples is Viagra. You know, it was a hypertension medicine and then ended up being good for something else, and became very popular. Um, a couple other classic examples, like classic. So Velcro, like I didn't know this actually before, maybe because it's so long ago, but 1941, I had no idea. And it was a Swiss engineer. He was walking around and these things are sticking to his socks. And he decided to like look at it under a microscope and he saw that it had the little barbs. So then he created Velcro with the little barbs that just hook on. And that's how Velcro was created. Um, I really like this chocolate chip cookies one. So this woman, Ruth Wakefield, this was in the U.S. She apparently ran out of chocolate, the powder to make something chocolatey when she was making cookies. So she took a Nestle's bar and she broke off little bits of it, and she thought it would just like dissolve in the cookie dough, but it made chips. And so she made the first chocolate chip cookie. Thank you, Ruth. Yes, for sure. Um, and then, of course, there are people like Thomas Edison. So these are inspired thinkers. These are people that really focus on creative ways to solve problems. And I think this is the way that really most of us in our work lives or personal lives will come across problems that need solving, but they're too hard to do immediately. Like, you know, if you're going to eat and you don't have a fork, you just get a fork. But there are some problems that are so complex that you really have to spend some time thinking about iterating on solutions and trying to find the best way to solve them. And that may be, you know, trying to fill the seats in your core or trying to build a core council. These are things that Samuel and I have been talking about for Ontario. He's building his core council. So, but yeah, so things like that take time, and building relationships, and some of the things you have to do really are just think about them. You just have to spend time thinking, which is odd. And like when I tell my boss, I'm like that I want to dedicate time to thinking about stuff. Like, are you sure? Can't you just actually do it? Well, you know, sometimes. But so yeah, Thomas Edison apparently tried. You know, he tried 1,000 times to make a light bulb, famously, and you probably heard his quote. They weren't wasted failures. He found 1,000 ways to not make a light bulb. So, okay, so let's talk about maximizing creativity just a little bit. Because there are definitely ways to do this. Like you need to activate certain parts of your brain to be most creative. In the marketing world, I bet Katie's creativity centers are huge. But a lot of us need to really work on that. So here are some ways to do that. So really shifting the way you think. You don't want to evaluate anymore. You really want to explore. You really want to think about different ways to do things. When they talk about thinking outside of the box. So brainstorming, I looked that up too. Brainstorming wasn't called brainstorming forever. It was called, no, I forget what it was called. But some guy came up with brainstorm because he had a military background and it was like storming the castle. So instead of everybody getting together in a room and thinking a lot, it was like, let's all put our brains together and storm this problem. So they're brainstorming is what they called it. Brainstorming is super important too. Really not to be negative about anything. So you want to be positive about anything that gets thrown up on the board. Because once you hear the word no, then people start to withdraw and they start to sort of edit themselves. And that's not what you want to do. You want everything out on the table, because you're looking for the answers to questions that are not obvious. So there's a company called IDEO, IDEO, and it's like uh, a business school example that people go through, and they work for companies like Apple and designing all the Apple like packaging and how things are designed. It's really cool. They design like uh, toothbrushes, like the handle of a toothbrush. They're the first ones to make it all rubberized and like curvy. They design shopping carts. But what they do is they get a bunch of people in the room and they just think of ways that humans interact with things and try to make them interact better. It's really interesting. That's what they do all day long. They just think about these problems and they come up with wild solutions. So stories, we're back to stories. So stories really do spark things in people's minds. Even when people are designing software for like your phone, designing an app, you have to define a user story. Like, this is what I want the user to experience at each spot. And then what does that imply? What does it not imply? So like for your board members, what are they experiencing? Are they coming, getting a cup of coffee? Do you make it easy for them? Are they going to the cafeteria to get their food before they sit down? Or does that make them tired in the middle of the meeting? Like, what does that imply for your meeting? Do you want to have them grab their food when they get up and get a break? Or will it be cold by then? I mean, it's endless. And then this idea piggybacking is really interesting. So, you know, Jerry Seinfeld and all these comics that you guys have all seen on TV, especially if they start in the improv world, this is what they do. So you give them an idea, whatever idea it is, and they have to improv. Like you go up, I could go up to Kalta. Be like, here is a baby pig. And then she's not going to be like, ooh, ugh. She can be like, okay, baby pig, what's next? Like, then she has to pass it on to somebody else. It exercises that muscle. Like, that was unexpected. My mom had a baby pig, and it became her pet. The old Filipino people, yes. I was going to say, it showed up at a party later on. But, yes, Kahlua pig. But the whole idea is yes and. You don't want to be no, but I don't know. It's yes and to every idea. Okay, next. Oh, we've done this several times today. Move the body physically. It really helps. And then framing. So framing questions is important too. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard that the brain doesn't hear the word no. So, like, I have kids. I'm not supposed to tell them, no, don't do that. I'm supposed to tell them, do this instead. It doesn't always work that way, but I try. It's supposed to, because if the mind doesn't hear the word no, and you tell them not to spill the milk, they're going to spill the milk because they don't hear that word no. So you can I tell them, be careful. And hopefully they're more careful. They might still spill the milk, though. And dedicated time. So this I read a long time ago about having dedicated creativity time. So if you get it in your mind that you want to make your meetings more interesting, and you spend a few minutes before each meeting or once a week thinking about interesting things that you want to share with the board, it'll be easier and easier every single time. So, like Katie, it's easy for her to come up with ad copy because she's done it for years and years and years, whereas it'd be hard for me. Okay. Oh, apparently to activate that part of your brain, this is what you do. Have you guys ever heard, like, if you're trying to tell if someone's lying, you watch their eyes? Did you ever hear that? I guess that's hit and miss, but so this is what they say about activating your own creativity. You look up into nowhere, kind of like soften your gaze, and just think about your problem, and then it'll come to you. Guarantee it's gonna work. There's also there's also a way to remember. It's to remember anything. I think it's look up and to the right. I could be wrong, but and then you ask yourself the question, and then you go about your day, and at some point, it's just gonna click and come to you. Practical. Okay. Speaking of which, okay. So before we finish, we'll go through a few practical tips and tricks and sort of scripts that you can use with your board. Okay. So we talked about a few things: energy, candor, curiosity. These are three things that will really help keep your board engaged. So start with meeting wins. We've talked about that a couple times already. Assigning clear micro roles, and then keeping some structure, but building in some surprises. It's always helpful. Any questions? Okay, some tactics. So, tactics are specific actions that you can do to realize your goals. So 60-second impact stories. Stories again, right? Define responsibilities so you can call on people. Oh, this is interesting. Have you guys all watched TED Talks? Yeah, so you guys may or may not know that TED Talks are always 18 minutes long. Did you know that? Yeah, because that's the span of attention that most people can endure without needing a break. So we talk about 60 to 75-minute meetings, but if you build in a break every 18 minutes, that's always safe. Oh, action lists, of course. Lists. What would we do without lists? Okay, curiosity. Okay, questions are great ways to build curiosity. I'll give you a couple here in a sec. Board brain trust sessions. So these are like brainstorming sessions, especially if you have committees. Obviously, you're going to be doing a bunch of this, like, finance committee. Like, oh, why is this so expensive all of a sudden? Brainstorming. Simple data to spark discussion. Funnily enough, I have an AI at my company called Spark, and my name is Sparks. So I got made fun of a little bit. Okay, next. Okay, so here are the questions that can help you build curiosity. What community need are we underestimating? Where do you see opportunity? Where do you see opportunity? Or what surprises you about this data? Like, I know what I'd like to say, but I want to hear what you think first. Or what if? What if is a great one. What if we, because if other people know that you're open to new thoughts, then they'll be more open to sharing with you. All right, next. Okay, psychological safety. We've talked about that a couple of things and why it's so important. And encouraging disagreement. So we talk about things like playing devil's advocate. That can be really useful. And then the 3-sentence candor script. All right. Okay, next, please. Okay. I really want you to speak openly with me. Your views really matter to me, even if they're different. Like, I really want to hear what you think. Kaltha's really good at this because she does listening circles, right? Honesty really helps us serve people better. I think that's an important point. Like, I really want your honest opinion. Like, it's not easy to get honest opinion. Like, people want to approve of you. Like, you're the core officer. That's a great that's a great idea, Captain. Like, I love that. I love that. Be honest. Okay, first 90 days plan. 3 meetings, right? If you have a meeting every 30 days. First one, reset roles and expectations. These are your roles and expectations. It's a good one to start off with because it really sets the foundation. And then second month, really spark curiosity. Get people curious about how to solve these problems. What's the real problem here? How are we going to solve these problems? And then third, really like hammer home, I really want to know what you think. Like, you're an experienced person. From your standpoint, I want to know what you think. So that's your 90-day plan. And then your leadership impact. You know, I really think you guys have an advantage because leaders that have a mission are so much more effective than those that do not have a true mission. Because, like I was talking about with Mr. Romines, his mission was to make good music, to entertain. Sure, we wanted to win the marching band competitions and stuff, but really, he wanted us all to play our best, and that was his mission. You guys all have an incredible mission, and you need to lean on that because that is why people are coming back, why people want to stay with you, why they want to follow you, because you know that you're going to do the most good. It's very important. What did you guys take away from this talk today? Anyone? Yeah, I love that. I love that. Is it call the ambulance? Yeah. Yes. Assigning someone, super important. Making sure people have roles. Awesome. Absolutely. Yep. Imbue that purpose in everything. Yep. Very good. Did I see a hand up there? Mm. Ooh. Yeah. Thanks, Dick. It's true. It's very true. You build that relationship, right? From the start of the day. Dick started us off. You'll get the participation. All right. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One, two. Yes. How do we reset roles and expectations to the board that are already in the communities that we are going to be into? We are new into these communities and they have already been there. Are we re-changing things? How does that look like?
You know, I think you'll be in a good position if you do want to change those because people expect change. Like, if you get a new leader, they expect a little bit of change. But at the same time, you can get their buy-in. That'll be another way that you can get their buy-in and their investment into your group. So there are some natural changes of order. One is going to be committee elections or chairman elections. That's going to be one. Another one is when you first come on, because that'll be another natural time to change things. If you don't feel comfortable up front changing them right away, then you tell your board. You just be frank and honest with them. So let's look at the roles and responsibilities here over the first 90 days, and then it's time for elections, or I'm going to make a proposal to the board. things like that. So you keep them involved for sure, but then eventually you'd like them to buy into those new roles. If they're new, or if you just want to emphasize certain ones, change the responsibility of certain roles, there's ways to do that too. Just being sensitive to people. There are going to be people like, Corps Sergeant Major or something might be very married to what he's been doing. Maybe he's been doing it for 10 years, 15 years, and you want to be sensitive to that. But at the same time, you can work with that person in changing any roles that you'd like to, and you can just give them the rationale why. But definitely pay attention to the natural schedule of change, and then don't underestimate the fact that they will expect some change for you. Because when you get there, they'll be very curious about what your priorities are and what you want to accomplish and how you're going to interact with all the core members, all of that. So that'll be your opening for sure if you wanted to make a change, but in a sensitive way, of course. It's a good question.
Sorry. I think maybe I got lost somewhere because when Mr. Dick was talking, he was saying that officers move from appointments every 3.5 years or so, right? And the people that have been on the board or the plans that have been in place are implemented for 7 years or longer. So when I come in and I start changing things and changing roles, is that within my scope? Is this acceptable? I think that's where I need to see what are we exactly changing. Maybe that's the question.
I would say that you are the executive, and we can ask Dick to weigh in also. You are the executive. So if you see a need for change, you will have to justify that. But obviously you're not just going to go in and willy-nilly make a whole bunch of changes for no reason. So if there is a need for it, I think it's okay. But yet, knowing that it's going to take 6 or 7 years to really come to fruition, but you can lay the groundwork at the very least if you see a need for something. If something's not going well, especially, then it has to be addressed regardless. If it's going well, then you're probably not going to change it anyway. So, Dick, did you have anything to add to that? Okay, thank you.
All right, we have the opportunity for one more question before we
All
go
right.
into a break here. Anybody else? Any other questions? Those are great questions.
So when we're talking about a core that is proverbially fallen asleep, like your night advisory board, I think that I'm most curious. Like I talked about it a bit at lunch with someone, where there are some advisory boards that essentially meet for lunch and then don't do much else. I'm just curious how you would go about waking that group up, or if there's a point where you have to just restart. Because I can see myself potentially going to a core where they don't participate in core activities, or just the meeting at lunch, and just talk and hang out for their meetings, and it's not helpful. But I don't know how I am expected to handle that, or how I should go about changing that
Yeah.
intention in group.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there are several ways you can go about it. And I think part of it relies on authenticity that we were talking about, and your style, like your style of how you want to interact with that group. And you'll have to gauge that a little bit with them. But if you're brand new to the situation, then it's going to be very difficult for you to assess. But if you assess that this group is very entrenched and they're not going to change very much, then you can do basically one of two ways. You can do wholesale change all at once, which may or may not go over well, depending on if you can get their buy-in, or you can do little bits at a time. Like, you can start introducing things a little bit at a time. Like, hey, what if we met at dinner? Or what if we dedicated at least 15 minutes to talking about these 3 issues? Like, these are really pressing to the core. I really want to get you guys' input. What if we dedicated that time to this? And then you could expand that from there. So you really, I mean, I think it's probably going to be situation dependent, whether, and I mean, if you wanted to build, you could recruit new people and really start to create change in culture. So the culture discussion is very important, and changing a culture, if you're not going to change the people, changing the culture does take a significant amount of time. And you have to really introduce different parts of the new culture, and you really have to start with yourself. Like, you have to show them that you're serious about, you know, building a more productive culture, while at the same time preserving the things that they want to preserve, because you may not want to lose them either. They're probably pretty good board members. So it's going to be a balance, but over the course of some time, you can change that culture. But like Dick says, that's very difficult. Can be done for sure, but it takes time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Well, we're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we're going to come back and finish up with our panel at 3 o'clock.
Thanks, everybody.